Hey, okay, so in this video we are continuing to talk about The Big Leap by Gay Hendrick, and I want to give you an overview of his, just practical strategies that he gives for letting go of your upper limit, for transcending it, and just starting to make this leap from this mindset that's going to prepare you, this lifestyle that will allow you to move from your zone of excellence to your zone of genius. Okay. He's got a really good list, and I just put some talking points here so I can go through them. If you're intrigued by these, I really do recommend the book. It's not a super long one. Some books I'll say, I'll read it, I'll boil it down, it's a long book. But this one, it really is pretty short, and I love it. But, okay, so he has this really interesting thing where he talks about worry, and he says when worry hits you, ask what good thing is trying to come through. Okay, I love this. Let me unpack this a little bit. Okay, so for starters, he talks about how just constantly worry, just having worry as your internal talk inside your head when you're just thinking and you leave the house and you drive away, and he gives the example of did I leave the kettle on? Did I leave the stove on or the water running or something like that? If you think, that's an actual legit worry that you could choose to go do something about. But he gives the example, my kids are little, but he's like, if your kid just started college and you just start worrying about how they're doing, he's just like, that is not productive, that's not constructive. There's nothing, unless you want to choose to call them, there's nothing that you can do. That's just you being worried. And he has this really interesting thing where he says, when you're happy or you're doing something or you're doing well, and then you're suddenly hit with this worry, he says to ask yourself what good thing is trying to come through that. And he gives this example of walking past a store window and seeing something and then feeling a hit of guilt. And then when he recognizes it and says, I choose to let this go and not go down this path, but I wonder what is trying to come through. And then he realizes there was this positive thought that was trying to come through, but it was kind of the negative thought swooped in. And anyways, this is just starting to make sense to me, but there's some ideas where I hear it and I'm just I know that's good, but I'm still unpacking it and it's still soaking into my bones. But I love that one, and so I wanted to mention that and for you to think about that when you suddenly find your thoughts turn negative, or if you're having a really great evening with a family or with your spouse or something, and then you suddenly start arguing. That is upper limiting behavior. I've found myself, one example that I realized from my life is we'd all be hanging out and so happy, and then I would have this urge to we're missing such and such, I need to go to the store, or I need to run to the storage unit, or I need to go get something. And then I realized, no, I don't. I need to allow myself to, it was what would make this better? And it was always, my ego always disguised it as this is such a good moment, how can I make it even better? How can I embrace it? But by leaving to try to fix it and make it better, I missed the moment, and I came back, and then the little kid was tired or whatever, the moment had passed. And so, kind of the overarching thought for this list is to practice feeling good. Forgot, I meant to start with that. Practice feeling good. And so the first thing that he talks about is worry. Work on not worrying about the things where you can't actually do anything about it. If you can do if it's a actual concern and you can do something, then do the steps to address it, or whatever it is that you need to do to let that out of your mind. But if you just find your mind just being in a state of worry, that is you upper limiting yourself and keeping yourself from just feeling good. So these practical steps are literally about practicing feeling good, which is also going to be a theme. Wayne Dyer talks about saying, part of that journey, that incredible journey that he talks about, one of the things that he says to do is just to say, I want to feel good. And I remember when I first read that thinking, well, that sounds really whatever. But no, that's the whole point. Our instincts are wrong on this. Okay, so let me go on to the next thing. He says, receive good that comes to you, whether gifts or compliments or synchronicity. Just receive the good. I heard somebody else talking about just this idea of receiving abundance and receiving things that come to you. Just watch for the good and acknowledge it and thank God for it, and just have that filter where you are seeing the good things that come to you and you acknowledge them and you receive them and you allow yourself to celebrate them. I think it was Jen Sincero talked about doing a little happy dance every time you received money. But that kind of thing, like synchronicity, every time I see synchronicity in my life, I've learned to stop and thank God and be like, thank you for this sign that I am on the right path, right? And when you get a compliment, I think as women we've all heard this, like, just receive it, don't. But he says that's an upper limiting behavior to deflect it. He says deflecting is, an upper limiting behavior. We're like, oh, thanks, but whatever. No, just receive it. Let the good come to you. It matters your attitude of receiving it or just kind of deflecting or rejecting it. Receive the good things that come to you. See them, celebrate them. Practice feeling good when they happen. Create space within you for natural good feelings. I love this. And he makes the point with natural good feelings. Natural good feelings are ones that don't come from like sugar or substances or something like that, right? Natural good feelings, just practice creating space for that. This one's good. Refuse to take the victim position in your relationships. He has this interesting thing where he talks about how every argument between people is jockeying for the position of the victim, and the way out is for both people to take 100% responsibility. And just in general, this was like a huge light bulb landmark thing for me last year when I realized that I could just take ownership of my life and stop waiting for somebody to give me permission. I didn't need to raise my hand. I didn't need for someone to come up and be like, Alicia, you can live your life now. You can do what you want to do now. You can quit your job now. Like, to take ownership and to stop having that victim mentality. He talks about how in relationships, that's huge. And I think relationships is so core and important to us. And so it's such a place for us to either practice feeling good or to allow ourselves to upper limit ourselves by using relationships or arguments or whatever to sabotage the happiness that we're feeling. Okay. Choose to believe that you can be happy in every area of your life simultaneously. He has some interesting stories where he talks about somebody who's really doing well financially, but struggling to let herself accept that she could be happy in a relationship, and with money and with creativity or whatever. A huge part of his book. And I think for many of us, it's like it's hard to let ourselves be really happy and successful in one area of life. And then the next step is to become happy and successful in a second area of life without sabotaging the first one, to build the layers. And this is so much about just understanding the game and being mindful and practicing awareness and then walking it out and finding people, community that you can have this language together, that you can say, hey, are you upper limiting yourself there? I had a friend that was like, how are you doing? She was like, oh, I'm just really hitting the upper limit. Like, that's what I'm feeling. And I'm like, oh, like having that common, oh, okay, we could talk about that. Like having that common language and being on this journey together, like that's huge. Find the people who will support you in that. Pursue integrity with yourself. I love this. If you have some place where you're out of integrity, you're out of wholeness, you're not telling somebody something that you need to tell them, you're not listening to yourself and your own feelings. He says, embrace your own true feelings, allow yourself to acknowledge and feel them. Pursue integrity with yourself. When you don't, when you're holding back something, when you're living that life, you are upper limiting yourself. You're keeping yourself from embracing the full scope of happiness. And when that's hard to do, you need to go back to the root of why it is. What is the fear? What are you believing? So then finally, he just says, be curious about your upper limit behaviors. I love this. He just says, have an attitude of wonder and curiosity. Don't beat yourself up. Don't make it a negative thing. Treat it as, okay, I gotta go. Treat it with awe and wonder and practice feeling good and enjoy the process. I will see you in the next video.